Jimmy's laugh froze, Questlove stopped mid-beat, and the audience held its breath because Reba McEntire recognized that voice from the back of the studio and couldn't finish the song. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Studio 6A at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. A Tuesday night in October. The kind of crisp fall evening when New York feels electric and anything seems possible. Reba McEntire was the musical guest. Country music royalty. A living legend with a career spanning 4 decades, dozens of #1 hits, and a voice that could make grown men cry. She'd been on the show countless times before, always professional, always gracious, always delivering a flawless performance. Tonight was supposed to be no different. She'd come to promote her new album, sat through the interview with Jimmy where they'd laughed about her latest tour stories, and now she was standing center stage for her performance. The lights were perfect. The band was ready. The audience was primed. The song she'd chosen was "The Greatest Man I Never Knew," one of her most powerful ballads, a song about a father and daughter relationship, about words left unsaid and love never expressed until it was too late. It wasn't from her new album. It was a classic from 1991. But Reba had insisted on performing it tonight. "It feels right," she told the producers during rehearsal. "I can't explain it. But I need to sing this one." The opening notes began. The Roots provided gentle, reverent accompaniment. This was Reba's moment, and they knew better than to overshadow a master. The studio lights dimmed slightly, a single spotlight illuminating Reba as she began to sing. Her voice was flawless. Rich, emotional, every word weighted with the kind of authenticity that comes from living the stories you sing. The audience was silent, transfixed. Jimmy sat at his desk, chin resting on his hand, just listening with the kind of respect you give to true artistry. Reba sang the first verse. Then the chorus. Her eyes were closed, lost in the song, in the emotion of it. This wasn't just a performance. It was a testimony, a confession, a prayer set to music. She was halfway through the second verse when it happened. From somewhere in the back of the studio, near the entrance where audience members had filed in hours earlier, a voice joined hers. Not loud. Not trying to steal focus. Just singing along. An older voice, weathered but strong, knowing every word, every note, singing with the kind of familiarity that comes from hearing a song 1,000 times. Reba's eyes opened. Her voice faltered for just a moment, so brief that most people might have missed it. But she recovered, kept singing, her eyes scanning the back of the studio, trying to locate the source of that voice. The voice continued. Harmonizing now. Not perfectly, this wasn't a professional singer. But with heart. With feeling. With something that transcended technique. Reba made it through another line. And then another. But her voice was shaking now, her pitch wavering slightly. Her hand came up to her chest, pressing against her heart. And then she stopped. Jimmy stopped mid-smile. The entire studio froze. Reba lowered her microphone to her side. The band, confused, kept playing for a few more notes before Questlove raised his hand to cut them off. The music died away, leaving only silence and that voice from the back of the studio, now singing alone, unaware that everyone had stopped to listen. The greatest man I never knew lived just down the hall. Reba's hand was still pressed to her chest. Tears were streaming down her face. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Jimmy was already standing, instinct overriding protocol. Reba? He called out, his voice carrying concern. Are you okay? Reba didn't respond to Jimmy. She was staring at the back of the studio, at the source of that voice, and her entire body was trembling. The voice in the back stopped singing, suddenly aware of the silence. Oh God, I'm so sorry, the voice said, an elderly woman's voice, embarrassed, mortified. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. Don't stop, Reba said, her voice hoarse, barely audible. Then louder. Please. Don't stop singing. The cameras were still rolling. The director in the control room was frantically asking through headsets what was happening. Should they cut to commercial? Should they keep rolling? Nobody knew. Jimmy walked out from behind his desk. The Roots had all stopped playing, instruments lowered, watching. 300 audience members sat in stunned silence, every head turned toward the back corner of the studio. Who are you? Reba managed to ask, taking a few steps toward the edge of the stage, shading her eyes against the stage lights to try to see into the darker audience area. There was movement in the back. Security guards stepped aside. And an elderly woman, maybe 75 or 80 years old with white hair and a trembling hand raised halfway in greeting, stepped into a bit more light. My name is Sarah, the woman said, her voice shaking. Sarah Parker. I'm so sorry, Miss McEntire. I didn't mean to ruin your performance. That song it means so much to me. I couldn't help myself. Reba wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her stage makeup. Sarah Parker, she repeated, her voice breaking. From Coalgate, Oklahoma? The elderly woman's hand flew to her mouth. Yes. How did you? Because you're not ruining anything, Reba said, her voice thick with tears. You're here. You're actually here. After all these years. You came. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 42 years earlier, in a small town in Oklahoma that most people have never heard of. Reba McEntire wasn't always Reba McEntire, country music icon. In 1982, she was a 27-year-old singer with one moderately successful album and dreams that seemed too big for someone from Chalky, Oklahoma. She was playing small venues, county fairs, opening acts for bigger names, trying desperately to break through. One of those small venues was a high school auditorium in Coalgate, Oklahoma. Population 2,000, the kind of town where everybody knew everybody and nothing much ever happened. Reba was scheduled to perform at a fundraiser for the school's music program. It paid almost nothing, but her manager had insisted it was good exposure. She'd driven herself 3 hours in a beat-up van, set up her own sound equipment, and prepared to sing for maybe 100 people. When she arrived at the school, she met the music teacher who'd organized the event. A woman in her late 30s named Sarah Parker. Sarah taught choir, directed the school plays, and had somehow convinced the school board to let her try to save the music program that was on the verge of being cut due to budget constraints. Thank you so much for coming, Sarah had said, shaking Reba's hand with genuine gratitude. You have no idea what this means to these kids. Some of them have never seen a real professional performer before. Reba had smiled, though inside she'd wondered if she even counted as a real professional performer. Yet, the performance that night had been magical. The auditorium was packed, not just students, but the whole town had turned out. Reba sang her heart out, gave everything she had, and the crowd loved her. They gave her a standing ovation. They asked for 3 encores. After the show, as Reba was packing up her equipment, Sarah had approached her with tears in her eyes. I need to tell you something, Sarah had said. That performance tonight, you just saved our music program. We raised enough money to keep it running for at least 2 more years. But more than that. She'd paused, composing herself. You reminded me why I became a teacher. Why music matters. I've been so discouraged lately, wondering if any of this makes a difference. But watching you tonight, watching how you connected with these kids, thank you. They talked for 2 hours after everyone else had left. About music. About dreams. About the struggle to make art matter in a world that often seemed to value everything else more. Sarah had told Reba about her own father, a man who'd worked in the mines, who never told her he was proud of her, who died suddenly when Sarah was 25 without ever hearing her sing. I teach music because he never got to hear music, Sarah had explained. Because somewhere in these kids might be someone whose father will hear them sing, will tell them they're proud, We'll have those conversations we never got to have." Reba had been deeply moved. Before she left that night, Sarah had given her a gift, a simple silver bracelet with a small musical note charm. "Keep this," Sarah had said. "And when you make it big, and you will, I can feel it, remember that you've already made a difference. Right here. In this little town. To these kids. To me." Reba had worn that bracelet to every performance for the next 5 years. Through her breakthrough hits. Through her first #1. Through her rise to stardom. It became her good luck charm, her reminder of why she sang. But in 1987, during a hectic tour, the bracelet had broken. The clasp had given out, and despite searching everywhere, Reba had never found it. She'd been devastated, feeling like she'd lost a piece of her foundation. She tried to find Sarah Parker to apologize, to explain, to maybe get another reminder of that night in Coalgate. But the school had closed. The town had no record of where Sarah had gone. Reba had lost touch with the woman who'd given her one of the most meaningful gifts she'd ever received. For 42 years, Reba had wondered what happened to Sarah Parker. Whether she was still teaching. Whether she'd ever known how much that night had mattered. And tonight, that woman was standing in the back of Studio 6A, having sung along to a song about fathers and daughters and words left unsaid. Behind the scenes, Fallon made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Jimmy walked to the center of the stage, standing beside Reba. He looked out at Sarah, then at the cameras, then back at Reba. "I think," Jimmy said quietly, "we need to hear the rest of this story." Reba nodded, unable to speak. Jimmy gestured to Sarah. "Ma'am, would you please come up here? To the stage?" Security helped Sarah navigate through the audience. She moved slowly, age and emotion making every step deliberate. The audience parted for her, and as she passed, people reached out to touch her arm, to offer tissues, to be part of this moment they didn't fully understand but could feel was important. When Sarah finally climbed the steps to the stage, Reba moved toward her. They stood face to face. Two women separated by decades but connected by one night in Oklahoma. "You came," Reba whispered. "I've watched every show," Sarah said, tears streaming down her weathered face. "For 42 years. Every performance I could find. Every award show. Every television appearance. Watching you become everything I knew you would become. Why didn't you reach out? Why didn't you find me?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Because you were living the dream. You didn't need an old music teacher from Coalgate reminding you of when you were just starting out. I was content to watch from afar. To know that I'd been there at the beginning." Reba reached into her jacket pocket. She was still in her performance outfit, but she'd stashed something there before the show. She pulled out a silver bracelet. Not the original, that was lost forever. But a new one, with the same musical note charm. "I've replaced this bracelet 17 times over the years," Reba said, holding it up. "Every time, hoping somehow it would lead me back to you. That you'd see me wearing it and know I never forgot." She fastened the bracelet around Sarah's wrist. "This one is yours. Because you gave me more than a good luck charm that night. You gave me a reason." But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Sarah reached into her own purse with shaking hands. She pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a tarnished, broken silver bracelet. "I found this," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "In the high school auditorium. 2 years after you performed there. We were tearing down the building, the school had finally closed, and I was cleaning out the music room one last time. It was under the stage. Your bracelet. I've carried it with me every day for 40 years, hoping someday I could return it." Reba took the broken bracelet with trembling hands, holding both, the old and the new, together. "You kept it. All this time. It was all I had left of that night," Sarah whispered. "The night that changed my life." Jimmy wiped his eyes, not even trying to hide his tears. The audience was openly sobbing. Questlove had his head down, shoulders shaking. Reba embraced Sarah, and the studio erupted. Not in applause, but in that collective release of emotion that comes when 300 strangers witness something sacred. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Reba and Sarah sang the song together, all the way through, backstage, just the two of them. Jimmy had the audio recorded and gave them both copies. Sarah returned to Oklahoma with the new bracelet on her wrist. Reba had the old broken one repaired and now wears both, one on each wrist. To every performance. And every year on the anniversary of that night in Coalgate, Reba calls Sarah. They talk for hours about music, about legacy, about the bridges we build without knowing it. That Tuesday night in Studio 6A proved something Jimmy Fallon had always believed. Sometimes the best moments happen when you stop trying to make television and just let life happen.